What exactly is the Talmud? The Talmud is actually two books. It's the Mishnah and the Gemara.
So anyone who's opened up a Gemara, a piece of Talmud, knows that it's basically a discussion expanding upon the Mishnah. So if you open a Gemara, it'll start with a Mishnah and then there will be commentary on it. But the Gemara really is not the Mishnah. But perhaps you're just not familiar with Jewish terminology. Let's keep listening.
Mishnah is supposed to be the oral law that was given to Moses, as well as the Gemara, which is a series of commentaries on said oral law.
Yeah, basically true. The nuance doesn't really matter. But funny that your bureau, when you mention the oral law, should show a picture of the Torah, which is the written law.
When we say Talmud, we're usually referring to the Talmud Bavli, or the Babylonian Talmud.
Got it. So from now on, when you talk about the Talmud, you are going to be talking about the Babylonian Talmud. Is that correct? You're not talking about the Jerusalem Talmud, also known as the Palestinian Talmud, the Talmud of the land of Israel. You're not talking about that at all. Let me just make sure I understand that.
Started in 70 AD, following the collapse of the Second Temple.
And as an observant Jew who grew up studying the Mishnah and the Talmud, I never heard anything of this before. The year 70 is when the temple was destroyed. The Mishnah was redacted in the land of Israel in the year 200, give or take, in Hebrew. And the Babylonian Talmud was in Babylon, which began sometime around the year 300 and was redacted somewhere between the year 5 and 600. It's written in Aramaic and it's in the Sasanian Persian Empire. What are you talking about, man?
Ending in 500 AD. Basically, they needed a way to solidify and continue to teach the teachings of the temple while there was no temple.
Now, the Mishnah has 6 different parts to it. Very few of them actually have anything to do with the temple. They have to do with many aspects of life, from agriculture to marital laws to tax laws to judicial laws. The temple, that's a very small part of it. And in fact, in the Babylonian Talmud, many aspects which have to do directly with the land of Israel are not discussed because they aren't relevant to the life of people in Babylon. However, they are discussed in the Jerusalem Talmud, and those are tractates that deal with agriculture.
This is also at the time in which Ashkenazim become fiercely insular and fiercely xenophobic.
Wait, what? Ashkenazim? You're calling the Jews of Iraq, of Babylon, in the 5th century Ashkenazim? Do you realize that Ashkenazim is a reference to Jews of northern France and Germany, and that community only began in the early Middle Ages, way after the redaction of the Talmud?
And fiercely xenophobic towards their Gentile counterparts.
Xenophobic is a pretty big word. I think it would be more appropriate to call the attitude of the surrounding nations and religions around the Jews xenophobic of Jews, constantly trying to persecute them and kill them. But as far as the Jewish attitude towards them, xenophobic is a bit of a big word. I would probably say that there is more polemics involved in disagreeing about the nature of God and the nature of the world. And this is coming from somebody who has read quite a lot of Talmud and Midrash.
You have to understand, Judaism isn't a religion like Christianity or Islam. It's a very unique and novel thing.
So the origin of Christianity and Islam, which is Judaism, is the novel thing. I get it.
From the rabbinic perspective, they don't really view God as a loving, all-dominant, all-present entity, but...
Did you know that in the Babylonian Talmud, one of the most common references to God is Rahamana, which means the merciful or the beloved, and what you are saying is not in line with the Talmudic view of God? But let's not get into Jewish theology right now. Not enough time for that, but no, this is wrong.
More like a sentient energy that exists that the rabbis can wield.
So Jews are basically Jedis. Gotcha. Use the Force, Rabbi.
See this across the Talmud. There are several verses wherein rabbis harness the power of God to create golems or communicate with demons. There's several times in which the rabbis come together and win in an argument against God.
Putting aside for a moment what is literal and what is exaggeration, metaphoric, and so on, a topic which is heavily discussed in rabbinic sources. The story that you refer to is more about adjudicating Jewish law being in the hands of humanity, not in heaven, which means that we have the power to interpret and adjudicate.
Basically, they believe that rabbis kind of have this central authority role and that God isn't really above the Israelites, but kind of behind them. A lot of the bulk of the...
If you've ever read the Bible, in the book of Genesis, God tells Abraham, walk before me, hitalech lefanai. And the way that traditional Jewish commentary understands that is that the role of the children of Abraham is to walk before God and not to wait for God to show the way. That has nothing to do with being above God. It means being partners in creation and being willing to take risks and walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Writing was written after the Christianization of Rome, which was a marriage between their two worst enemies, the Christians of Jerusalem and the Roman Empire that destroyed their temple. A lot of the writings are very, very negative towards Christians.
Just to be clear, you're talking about the Babylonian Talmud, right? The Babylonian Talmud was written in Babylon under the Sasanian Persian Empire, and if you were to take all of the quotes across the entire Babylonian Talmud that deal with Christianity and put them together, they would fill up maybe one page. The Talmud has a lot more to say about Zoroastrianism.
Are very, very negative towards Christians, towards Jesus, towards the Virgin Mary. There's a lot of stuff in there.
The Babylonian Talmud has very little to say about Christianity. The Jerusalem Talmud, which was more impacted by Christianized Rome, has a lot more to say about it. And the Midrashim, which extend into the early Middle Ages and were a lot more impacted by Christianity, have a little more to say. Some of it is a little bit of mockery. Some of it is polemic. Most of it's really polemic. And it would be very hard to call that offensive in comparison with what the New Testament has to say about Jews. So I don't know how much perspective and balance there is here, dude, but...
That's like deeply, deeply offensive. Was it justified for them to write it? I personally do not think so.
Of course you wouldn't. You don't know what you're talking about. Babylonian Iraqi Jews in the 5th century are Ashkenazim, and the Bible is novel.
Oh, but that is kind of the argument, is that, oh, well, they were dealing with persecution. That's up for you to decide. I just present things very unbiased here.
Clearly, Captain Obvious. Clearly.